James McAvoy. In my opinion, one of the most underrated actors working today. He's been in dozens of exceptional films throughout his career, and yet always seems to fly underneath the radar, with nothing but a Rising Star award to his name. But with his new film, Speak No Evil, in cinemas right now, I thought there was no better time to look back at his career and prove once and for all that this man is one of the best to ever do it. Now, the wrong uns amongst you might think that he isn't underrated and in fact properly rated, and to you, I'd like to do the following.
Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out!
But instead, I'll just show you this. This is James McAvoy's timeline. As you can see, I've picked out 5 key performances I think show him at his absolute best. I guarantee that by the end of this video, you'll be in agreement with me. But if somehow you're still not, leave a comment down below and we'll organise a scrap. And so, without further ado, let's start with our first film, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. What do you know about my man, Mr. Tumus? He is the GOAT. Literally. Now, the last time I watched this film must have been over 10 years ago, and back then I wasn't really into films, so I actually had no idea James McAvoy played Mr. Tumus.
Stupid!
And I know, it's hardly the biggest role, nor the most earth-shattering performance, but it is undeniably iconic. I bet if you asked 100 people who their favourite character from Narnia was, at least half of them would say Mr. Tumus. I mean, come on! How can I make a video about James McAvoy without talking about him? I just couldn't. But anyways, there's not really much else to say about this one, so let's just move swiftly on to our next film. This next performance really put McAvoy on the map, and in general, it's just a brilliant film. The Last King of Scotland. The Last King of Scotland is a biographical thriller that depicts the brutal dictatorial regime of Idi Amin in Uganda in the 1970s. We are shown what transpires through the eyes of his personal physician, Dr. Nicholas Garrigan, who is played by McAvoy. Now, this is McAvoy's first proper film. Now, I know he's been the lead in other films, but they weren't on the same scale as this one. This was his first chance to really show what he could do, and he did not disappoint.
Woo, I'm about to make a name for myself here.
Garrigan comes to Uganda fresh out of medical school. He dreads the thought of following in his father's footsteps, living out a mundane, boring life, and so spins a globe and goes to the first place his finger lands on. Now, this sort of behaviour is pretty indicative of his character in general. Garrigan is basically a cocky, naive prat that also has, shall we say, some overactive hormones. Now, I never really had McAvoy down as a sort of Chad type, but after seeing this film, he actually suits it perfectly. He really uses those baby blues as lethal weapons, flashing them to any woman that comes within a 5-mile radius. That being said, he still does do pretty well in the more emotional, sensitive parts of the film, but you just can't help but think that he gets what's coming to him, to be honest. He's the sort of character you describe as morally ambiguous, because although you're definitely questioning basically every action he takes, it does make the film a lot more interesting to watch, as we're seeing it through his perspective. Now, before you say it, I know, the reason this film has the reputation that it has, and is as acclaimed as it is because of Forest Whitaker. His performance is exceptional. I'm not under any illusions that James McAvoy is the man that made this film what it is. He was great, yes, but Forest Whitaker is clearly the star of the show. The same, however, cannot be said about our next film, where McAvoy absolutely steals the show, and that film is Atonement. Now, Atonement's a film that I'd heard mentioned loads of times, and I'd seen plenty of clips from, but I just knew nothing about it. But after watching it, I think it's the first time that McAvoy is really the standout of a film. The film follows Robbie, played by McAvoy, who works for an upper-class British family around the time of the Second World War. After misinterpreting what she sees, Bryony, the youngest daughter of the family, wrongly accuses Robbie of the R word, and as a result, he is conscripted into the army as punishment, instead of being sent to prison. The additional context to this is twofold. Number one, hours before Robbie's arrested, he confesses his love for the eldest daughter of the family, Cecilia, played by Keira Knightley, which she reciprocates. And number two, Robbie is the embodiment of goodness, which I will talk about more later. Now, as you'd expect from that description, this film is very sad. It deals with themes of grief and guilt expertly, but in a way I hadn't seen before. The structure of this film is also quite unusual. It's broken into 3 sections, with each section corresponding to a different period in Bryony's life. But let's go back to McAvoy. As I said, Robbie is the embodiment of goodness. Before the accusation, we see he is hard-working, kind, and incredibly caring for the entire family, to which he isn't even related by blood. And even when he is sent off to war, he doesn't moan or complain. He simply gets on with it, purely driven to get back to his love, Cecilia. In my opinion, this film is the first look at the extent of McAvoy's acting capabilities. He is exceptional. He doesn't rely on bawling his eyes out or overacting. It's an incredibly subtle yet moving performance that I think deserves much more credit. But anyways, I think after that, we need a more upbeat film to raise our spirits. And I'll give you a clue to what it is. I'm thinking of a word right now, and you have to read my mind, wink wink, to guess what it is. If you guessed, like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video. Congratulations, you're correct. But I am deeply concerned for you. And of course, I'm talking about XMen. Now we're really into characters you think of when you think of James McAvoy. He's reprised the role of Charles Xavier 3 times, in First Class, Days of Future Past, and Apocalypse. And Wait, what was that? You think he's been in 4 films?
Oh, fuck. I can't believe you've done this.
If you grew up around the early 2000s like me, you would have grown up with films like X-Men 1 and X-Men 2, which of course starred the legendary Sir Patrick Stewart as Professor X. And even if you haven't seen those, you almost certainly will have heard of Patrick Stewart. Now I can only imagine the pressure that McAvoy must have felt stepping into this role, especially with it being a comic book character whose fan bases are, shall we say, not particularly well known for being reasonable when it comes to these sort of things. However, with all that said, I think he did an absolutely iconic character justice. We all know that prequels can be hit or miss, and an actor can only work with the script he's given, but I think McAvoy did an awesome job with the role. Xavier is a pretty interesting character, with a lot of nuance and complex relationships, and McAvoy navigates them perfectly. And, when you're a hit with the comic book fans, you know you're doing something right. My favourite out of the 3 films is definitely First Class, as it gives us by far the most developed story arc for the character. My only complaint about the film is that they did Darwin dirty. But anyways, listen, I get it. This is a superhero film, and as good as McAvoy is, no one's winning Academy Awards from them. However, the same cannot be said about the final film on this list, and I think you all know which film I'm talking about. Romeo and Juliet. Split and Glass. McAvoy's performance in Split and Glass are, for me, the best of his career. I don't know if you necessarily call them superhero films, but regardless, this man deserves some awards from them. I don't understand how people just brush over the fact that he played 26 different characters in one film and switches between them on the fly. I know most of them only had a line or 2, but I'd say a good 10 of them were fully fleshed out, entirely distinct characters. Even if the concept is a bit gimmicky, what he achieved with this film I think is remarkable. We've got to just talk about the Beast for a second too. He was genuinely terrifying. I can still see the exact scene of him bending the metal bars at the end of Split. His face is burned into my memory. Also, and I can't believe this is the first time I'm bringing this up this video, but his voice work alone was exceptional. For a man with a thick Scottish accent, he is an absolute wizard. Now in terms of the films themselves, I loved Split, but I wasn't a huge fan of Glass, especially the ending. The whole superhero unaliving society was just a bit weird, and I would have much preferred the Beast to have hit Sarah Paulson with some sweet chin music. But I digress. And with that, we've reached the end of the video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, why not check out this other video I made, where I talk about restricted dialogue films.